Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. In the prior verse, we saw God clothe Adam and Eve with animal skins. Now we're going to see what he pronounces next. Kai apen hatheos, idu adam gegonin, hos heis ex hemon, to genoskein kalan kai poneron. And we'll finish here in just a second with the latter half of the verse. Well, we start with apen. This is, of course, the third singular aorist of Lego. We've seen that numerous times in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And the subject here is hatheos, so and God said. Now it's worth pointing out that in the Masoretic, this is actually Yahweh Elohim again, which we saw in the prior verse. For whatever reason, the translator doesn't include kurios here. That's not that uncommon. In fact, in a future video, I'll get into all the different ways divine names are handled in the Septuagint, which is quite an interesting study in its own right. But God said, Idu, behold, Adam, Gegonin. This is with the reduplication, spelling change to gon, and third singular here. This is a third singular perfect active indicative from ginomai. So Adam has become ginomai there. Hos as, then we have heis ex hemon, not the easiest thing to pronounce with all those S's and C's and so forth. So this is one. This is actually ek. We've seen this previously. Ek, when it's followed by a rough breathing, will switch to the X form. So he has become as one of us. Though there is some debate on this, I would take this as a reference to the essential or intrinsic plurality of the triune God. The us there going back to creation. He's become like one of us. In what sense? To genoskein, and then the genoskein there is from genosko. This is a present active infinitive with the genitive article here. To know or in knowing, kalan kai paneron, so good and evil. Which is really interesting because that's what Satan had promised in Genesis 3:5. When he was twisting God's word, he said, look, if you eat from the tree, which God had told them not to eat from, eseste, you will become hos theoi, as gods, probably, referring back to this hemon here, but not God himself, a lower kind of supernatural being like the angels. Then we have genoskantes kalan ke paneron, which is very similar to genoskein kalan here, and so on. So in a certain sense, Satan wasn't wrong in what he was promising. He was, though wrong, of course, obviously, in the means by which they were going to obtain that end. So what's God going to do in light of the fact that now man and woman know good and evil? So here's what he says next. Kai nun mepate ektene ten herakai labe to zulu tes zoes kai fage kai zesita es tan iona. Now let's work on the translation here. This is a bit tricky. It begins with nun mepate. So now, this would be something like now, lest. And it's actually not going to be finished until 3:23. So we'll get to that in the next video. God says now, to prevent something from happening, and we don't know exactly how he's going to stop this from happening. We'll find out in the next verse. But lest, and then we have a chain actually of three subjunctives. They're all subjunctive because of the mepate here. So lest he, there's going to be a third singular, ektene, that's from ekteno. And so with that ending there, it's a lengthening of the connecting vowel with a third singular ending. So it's a third singular aorist active subjunctive. So, and this is from the word for extend or reach out. So lest he extend tenkera, the hand, and labe, this is also a third singular aorist active subjunctive with that ending and a spelling change. And take, and what is he going to take? To Zulu, from the tree, tes zoes, of life, referring back to Genesis 2:9. And finally, phage there, this is from estheo. We've seen that morphology before. We've seen it as a second singular future middle, but in this case, it's actually a third singular aorist active subjunctive. They're spelled the same, and it's all because of all the nonsense about the spelling changes with that connecting vowel. And so, lest he eat. So notice there's a chain of these third singular aorist active subjunctive. So, lest he reach out his hand and take from the tree of life and eat. That's the warning, or that's the possibility that God is going to now try to forestall. Now, if he does that in this state of sin, it becomes a big problem. Zesitais from zao is a third singular future middle indicative, and so he will live eis tan iona, forever. And so we don't know exactly what God's going to do yet, but to anticipate, he's going to kick them out of the garden. really what God is saying here is, now that Adam and Eve have fallen and they've obtained this knowledge that only I and the divine beings in his heavenly court have, that he was trying to prevent them from having, now I'm going to prevent the possibility of them living forever in a state of sin. He wants to prevent them from taking from the tree of life that would cause them to live unto the age or forever in this state of sin. So he's going to try to bar that from them in the next verse. So it's an act of grace, actually, to prevent the worst possible outcome, which is a perpetual state of fallenness without a Redeemer. And so God is going to take action to prevent this situation from happening.